I used to think my parents were just old school. My mom still writes grocery lists on paper. My dad listens to vinyl and rants about how music just had soul back then. But the older I get, the more I realize they're not stuck in the past, they were shaped by it. They grew up in the 1970s, and it shows. I used to brush off their habits as generational quirks, but when I started diving into psychology, something clicked. Their worldview wasn't random. It was programmed by an era that reshaped how people thought, felt, and lived. And honestly, I get it now. Here's what makes people from the 70s psychologically different and why some of us are still trying to catch up. Number one, they were trained to chase the self. The 1970s weren't just polyester and peace signs, they were a psychological revolution. Thinkers like Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow sparked what we now call the human potential movement. The idea? You're not here to follow orders, you're here to grow. People from this era internalized the belief that life is about personal meaning, just not success. That's why so many of them still journal, meditate, or quote self-help books. Decades before it became trendy. Number two, they question everything. If you ever wondered why your 70s raised uncle doesn't trust the news, here's why. He grew up during a decade of disillusionment. Vietnam, Watergate, political scandals, people saw the truth fall apart in real time. This gave birth to what psychologists call epistemic vigilance, the tendency to question information sources. It's not just being skeptical, it's being mentally self-reliant. Number three, they normalized emotional depth. Before the 70s, emotional repression was the default. But during this decade, therapy and self-exploration went mainstream. People began to see feelings as something to process, not to hide. And this shows up in how they parent, love, and even argue. They're more likely to say things like, "Talk to me about how you feel," because that was the new norm, not a weakness. Number four, freedom wasn't a want, it was a need. In psychological terms, people from the 70s often score higher in the self-determination theory, especially the drive for autonomy. This era produced van dwellers, solo travelers, and entrepreneurs not because they were rebellious, but because they needed to have their own path. That's why people from that generation often resist rigid schedules or unnecessary rules. Freedom equals sanity. Number five, they embraced the fringe, and they made it normal. Reiki, herbal tea, astrology. In the 70s, these weren't cute trends, they were psychological explorations. This openness reflects cognitive flexibility, a trait linked to creativity, empathy, and resilience. They weren't being weird, they were expanding their inner world. So if someone from the 70s seems deeper, freer, or harder to impress, now you know why. They weren't just raised in a different time, they were wired by it. Drop a comment if this reminds you of someone in your life, or maybe if it sounds just like you.